Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be reviewing The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and then just so we're all on the same page, this will be a spoiler-free review, so if you haven't read the book, that is totally okay. I'm going to give my thoughts on the book without mentioning any specifics from the book. And so, the first thing that has to be brought up about this book is the size of it. It is probably the longest book that I've ever read. It is huge. It is a literal brick while you're reading it, and that could be really daunting to a lot of people. I know that it's a little scary to like pick up a book that large. Let me just say it is engaging all the way through. Like you there really is no point where you feel like you're kind of like slogging through the series. But I actually felt like the length of the book was kind of a bonus for me, just because when I put it in context of what Brandon Sanderson is trying to construct with the Stormlight Archive, it gets me really excited. So Brandon Sanderson is said that the Stormlight Archive is going to be 10 books long, each of them about the same length as The Way of Kings. And so that means that we are looking at a gigantic epic series, and there is so much potential in that, especially when you have such a strong first entry like The Way of Kings. I mean, this could not be a better entry into what I feel like he is trying to create. And so then let me kind of get into the negative things that I have to say about the book, and then I'll kind of get into the positive things after that. So I read this book right after reading The Fires of Heaven, which is the fifth Wheel of Time book, which I loved. Like the Fires of Heaven was probably one of the best books I've ever read. Like just full stop. Like it was incredible. And I had really high expectations for The Way of Kings. Like I had heard so many people talk about how good it was. One of the greatest fantasy books ever written. Just the greatest. I People said it was really good, but like I jumped into it right after the Fires of Heaven, so like I'm already really invested in like the Wheel of Time. I'm 5 books in. I know a lot about the world. I know all the characters really well, and so then getting like thrown into the Way of Kings, it was just a little jarring, just because I enjoy Robert Jordan's writing style more than I enjoy Brandon Sanderson's. I like the kind of flowery prose that like Robert Jordan likes to use. Not to say that Brandon Sanderson's prose is bad. Just that I enjoy Robert Jordan's more. And so there was like that kind of that was a little jarring, and then just like being thrown into this equally sized epic fantasy world, like same size as Wheel of Time, and then to know completely nothing. It was just like whoa, is disorienting, Now that didn't, it didn't take long for me to like really still dig into this book, but I would say though that I think that I wish that I hadn't read this book in the middle of reading The Wheel of Time. Like I think that there's a good chance that I will wait to pick up the next book, even though I loved it. I love this book, but there's a really good chance that I will wait to pick up Words of Radiance until I've finished The Wheel of Time, just because I want to be able to truly appreciate this book. And so I just had such high expectations going into it. Like I thought it was going to be like the best thing ever, and it was really really good. Like it was amazing, but it didn't live up to like, I think it was my fault. I just built it up too much in my head, and like just coming off of reading like such an another great book in the middle of a series, it put me back a little bit. But I still really really enjoyed this book. But then what I would say from there, so that aside, is that so when we look at the three things that we would normally look at when we're talking about a fantasy book, you talk about character, you talk about magic, and you talk about world building, and plot to a degree. But world building, I actually felt like was the weakest of those four things for this book. Not to say that it was bad, but I just felt like, I mean, it's a huge book, and to come away from it like feeling like I've just barely scratched the surface of this world, was a little weird. And like obviously it's still really cool. Like I'm still really excited to learn more about this world. But I also felt like certain aspects of the world, I just didn't find them super interesting. Like you know what I mean? Like you can tell that a world's big, but is it interesting? Like you know what I mean? Like do I want to put in the effort to learn about this world? And some elements of the world, I definitely felt that. Other elements of the world, I didn't really feel that. And so it just wasn't my favorite part of it. But that's really all I have to say, like negative about the book. And so then to get into the better things, the best part of this book was the characters. And like I kind of expected that. I mean, Brandon Sanderson, his character work is flawless. I mean, he's arguably one of the best in the game when it comes to characters. Way of Kings was no different. These were like some of my favorite. Like the only other Brandon Sanderson work I'd read up to this point is the Mistborn series, and like I love the characters in the Mistborn series. I'd say that at least two of the characters from Way of Kings trounce the characters from Mistborn, and I love Mistborn and I love the characters, but the Way of Kings had some incredibly dynamic, fleshed out characters. The main kind of three characters that you're following, incredible. They are so good. They are so good. And like them alone, like they like make me so excited for this. The following books. So character work phenomenal, and then the magic system I also thought was really cool. Another thing I basically kind of expected. Brandon Sanderson, he writes these really great hard magic systems. Stormlight Archive was no different, or I guess the Way of Kings. The Way of Kings was no different. Great, really interesting magic system. I actually usually prefer like kind of a softer magic system, but I love Brandon Sanderson's magic system so much that like I loved it. And like you can also tell, just like I love that Brandon Sanderson does things different for the fantasy genre. Like he is slightly innovative in that way. Like he puts in these like refreshing things, and like we're not just dealing with like medieval England. And that's my favorite series, literally A Song of Ice and Fire, literally deals with medieval England, but like Brandon Sanderson, he jumps outside of that, and we get these like newer outside influences affecting his worlds, and I really really enjoy that. And you just see some more like refreshing takes on just some of the more common fantasy tropes, and so I do really enjoy that aspect of Brandon Sanderson's writing. And so like I said, just to reiterate, I really, it's a long book, but it is not a slog by any means. It was so engaging all the way through. It's really fun. I guess it's also worth talking about the format. So this book, it started with a prelude and then a prologue, and then you get the first chapter. And I just thought that was so interesting. I'm like, oh, I'd never seen that before. I mean, it's fine. I feel like prologues get a lot of hate, but I've actually come to appreciate them more in recent readings. But so it was just interesting. Like you read the prelude, you're like, all right, now let's get into it. Now we got a prologue. But I mean, that was fine. And this book also had interludes, which I thought was interesting. In between the books there were interludes. It was fine, but I'm so excited for what Brandon Sanderson is crafting. I mean, this was incredible. I think that the Stormlight Archive, just from this entry, I've only read this entry, it has potential to go down as the greatest fantasy series ever. I don't know if it'll be. It definitely, like, if I'm looking at other first entries, I mean, I think that A Game of Thrones was a better first entry. I think that The Eye of the World was a better first entry. But like when I'm looking at other series, like The Blade itself, I mean, The Way of Kings smashes The Blade itself. But I wasn't a huge fan of The Blade itself. But these, of the three epic fantasy series I've read, this one definitely ranks the third. But like, I mean, it's still really really good and so much better than so many other works out there. And so overall, I would say that I really really enjoyed The Way of Kings. I'm really excited to read it again, even though I won't be picking up the second book for a little bit, just because I want to fully appreciate the series. I really really enjoyed it. I would recommend it to anybody that is looking for something massive, something epic. I would highly recommend it. I mean, this is a huge world, great character. If you love great characters, you will love The Way of Kings. Brandon Sanderson writes the best characters. You will thoroughly enjoy it. But if you guys disagreed with anything I said in this video, please leave a comment down below. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.